Shalom, everyone. The book of Jasher gives insight on a number of things written in the book of Genesis. For example, after Adam and Eve was kicked out of the Garden of Eden, it states she bore 2 sons and 3 daughters to Adam. So they started off with 5 children. Now that can be found in the 12th verse, or that's in the 12th verse of the first chapter in the book of Jasher. Okay. Now the name Jasher is a transliteration from a Hebrew word meaning the upright or the righteous. So the book of Jasher means the book of the upright or the book of the righteous. This book is mentioned in 2 different places in the King James Version of the Bible. Well, in most Bibles, but of course most people go by the King James Version of the Bible. And the book of Jasher is mentioned in 2 different places in the Bible. So let's turn to the book of Joshua. Joshua, the 10th chapter and the 13th verse. Of course, we know his name was pronounced Yahshua with a Y. Back then, they didn't have a J sound. Or they don't have a J sound in the Hebrew language. So yeah, Joshua and the Messiah had the same exact Hebrew name. Their both name was Yahshua. But Yahshua, the 10th chapter and the 13th verse. And the sun stood still and the moon stayed until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. Is not this written in the book of Jasher? So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven and haste not to go down about a whole day. So we see here in the book of Jasher, in the book of Joshua or Yahshua, the 10th chapter, the 13th verse, the book of Jasher is mentioned. Let's go to 2 Samuel. 2 Samuel, first chapter, the 18th verse. Also he bade them teach the children of Judah the use of the bow. Behold, it is written in the book of Jasher. So here again, we see someone else referencing the book of Jasher. Now we know out of the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, let everything be established. So before we jumped into the book of Jasher, I wanted to make sure that, we see that they had other people in the word also referencing the book of Jasher. Okay. Now let's see if we could find what we just read in those verses in Joshua the 10th chapter, 13th verse, as well as 2 Samuel the first chapter and 18th verse. Let's see if we could find that in the book of Jasher. Jasher, the 88th chapter and the 64th verse. And Yahuwah hearkened to the voice of Yahshua, and the sun stood still in the midst of the heavens, and it stood still 36 moments. And the moon also stood still and hastened not to go down a whole day. So we see here, this is what the book of Joshua in the King James Version of the Bible, this was the verse or verses, because, you have some verses above that and below that that's speaking on this same topic. However, these are the verses that the King James Version of the Bible was referring to. Okay, let's go to the 56th chapter of Jasher, so we could look at what 2 Samuel was speaking of. Jasher, the 56th chapter, the 8th through the 9th verse. And Yaakov said unto Judah, I know, my son, that thou art a mighty man for thy brethren. Reign over them, and thy sons shall reign over their sons forever. Only teach thy sons the bow and all the weapons of war, in order that they may fight the battles of their brother, who will rule over his enemies. So this, actually, that 9th verse is the verse that that 2 Samuel, the first chapter and the 18th verses, is referring to in the book of Jasher. It's a very, very good book to read. I mean, it's a nice size one now, but it's a very good book to read, and it gives us a lot of insight. Like I said earlier, that the book of Genesis and some of the other books, Exodus and stuff, they kind of leave out. So let's check out a few of the other verses to see, to just to whet your appetite. I'm not going to give you too much because it's something for you to read for yourself. But let me give you a few verses just so you'll see what I'm talking about. Jasher, the 9th chapter, the 1st through the 4th verse. And Haran, the son of Terah, Abram's oldest brother, took a wife in those days. Haran was 39 years old when he took her. And the wife of Haran conceived and bore a son, and he called his name Lot. And she conceived again and bore a daughter, and she called her name Milcah. And she conceived and she again conceived and bore a daughter, and she called her name Sarai. Haran was 42 years old when he begat Sarai, which was in the 10th year of the life of Abram. And in those days Abram and his mother and nurse went out from the cave, as the king and his subjects had forgotten the affair of Abram. Now, I'm not going to go into the forgotten affair of Abram, which is a wonderful story about with the king and stuff. I'm not going to break that down. However, I do want to bring up about Sarai. Now, as we see here, and if we go further in the book of Jasher, it breaks it down even the more. But in the book of Genesis, it only speaks that Abram's brother Haran had died, and that's how he ended up getting Lot, taking care of his nephew Lot. It also talks about Abram's other brother Nahor married Milcah, which was Lot's sister. Now, what it doesn't mention in the book of Genesis is that Sarai is also the sister of Lot and Milcah. So Abram married his niece, Sarai, according to the book of Jasher. Sarai was his niece, which was Lot's sister as well as Milcah's sister, all the children of Haran. Wonderful. But let's keep reading. Jasher, the 9th chapter, the 5th through the 6th verse. And when Abram came out from the cave, he went to Noah and his son Shem, and he remained with them to learn the instruction of Yahuwah and his ways. And no man knew where Abram was, and Abram served Noah and Shem, his son, for a long time. And Abram was in Noah's house 39 years, and Abram knew Yahuwah from 3 years old. And he went in the ways of Yahuwah until the day of his death, as Noah and his son Shem had taught him. And all the sons of the earth in those days greatly transgressed against Yahuwah, and they rebelled against him, and they served other mighty ones, and they forgot Yahuwah, who had created them in the earth. And the inhabitants of the earth made unto themselves at that time every man his mighty ones of wood and stone, which could neither speak, hear, nor deliver. And the sons of men served them, and they became their mighty ones. This book, I'm just saying, this book, it breaks so much stuff down. Now, Genesis doesn't even mention that. No, well, first off, Abram hit the scene in the book of Genesis as an adult. Here, it starts with Abram being a young child. Even before these verses, it talks about Abram. However, what Genesis doesn't touch is the fact that he actually lived with Noah and Shem, and this is why he had that relationship with the Most High. He lived with them for 39 years. Wow. Let's go to Jasher, the 22nd chapter. Jasher, the 22nd chapter, the 40th through the 45th verse. And Isaac, the son of Abraham, was growing up in those days, and Abraham, his father, taught him the way of Yahuwah, to know Yahuwah, and Yahuwah was with him. And when Isaac was 37 years old, Ishmael, his brother, was going about with him in the tent. And Ishmael boasted of himself to Isaac, saying, I was 13 years old when Yahuwah spoke to my father to circumcise us, and I did according to the word of Yahuwah. which he spoke to my father, and I gave my soul unto Yahuwah, and I did not transgress his word which he commanded my father. And Isaac answered Ishmael, saying, Why doest thou boast to me about this, about a little bit of thy flesh, which thou didst take from thy body, concerning which Yahuwah commanded thee? As Yahuwah liveth, the mighty one of my father Abraham, if Yahuwah should say unto my father, Take now thy son Isaac and bring him up an offering before me, I would not refrain, but I would joyfully accede to it. And Yahuwah heard the word that Isaac spoke to Ishmael, and it seemed good in the sight of Yahuwah, and he thought to try Abraham in this matter. Wow. There's a few wows in this. Genesis doesn't say anything about this. First off, I didn't know prior to reading this that Isaac was 37 years old. He was in his 30s. He was close to 40 years old before his dad offered him up. Because in Genesis, it speaks to him about being a lad. But when you look up the word lad, it also means a young man. And of course, 37 years old to someone that's 100 that lives up, to 500, 600 years old. Of course, that's just a lad. 37 is just a lad, So he was 37 years old. So it wasn't that you had a little kid tied up. This was a grown man that had to submit to his father to be sacrificed. Come on. And it says that because of Isaac saying this to his brother Ishmael, the father said, you know what? I'm going to try Abraham on this. Wow. There's so much in this book that really breaks stuff down. I can't say that enough. Hopefully this has been a blessing to you, for another source to read, to get closer to the Father, for understanding. A good news is the fact that you don't actually have to buy the book. You can look it up on Google. There's a free PDF form of the book of Jasher, a free PDF form that you could get to read. Once again, it's an excellent read. Hopefully, this has been some stuff that will spark some interest to want to read. Once again, it's real good. It breaks down a lot of things that the book of Genesis and other books just basically kind of skip over or leave out. That's the end. I don't want to give too much more. There's so much in this book, but I don't want to give too much more. You all be blessed.